Hola clase, ¿cómo están ustedes? Estoy muy feliz verles. Even though I'm not really seeing you, I'm hoping that this will get to you. Hey, I wanted to tell you that everything went through great with surgery, but I do need to be careful about recovery, trying to not do too many things. And typing is one of the worst things I can do. So I thought I would make this video. I want to make sure that you have been able to see and work on some of the assignments from this week and understand what you are doing. We have our upcoming assessment, which involves making comparison statements and superlative statements, comparisons of equality and inequality. And I felt, as you probably remember, I didn't feel like the notes on the back of our vocab sheet were sufficient. So I hope you all were able to get a copy of the notes that I prepared instead, and then there was some work to do. We're going to take a look at some of those handouts and make sure that you know what was expected of you, and then I'll explain what is going to happen today, Friday, March 27th, I believe, yes. And so that way you'll be a little bit more prepared. Then you should have time at the end for a study guide and to work on that. All right, here we go. I decided to pause this video for a moment. Instead of going over all of the assignments and explaining how they would have worked and what your answers should have been, and just explaining a little bit more about comparative statements and superlative statements, I wanted to give you a chance to work on the around the room activity. There should be slips of paper with questions on your desks. I wish I could show my screen to you and pull up that document for you. Unfortunately, every time I do, the recording for the microphone does not work, so I apologize for that. But for example, the first one says, ¿Quién es el mejor jugador o la mejor jugadora de baloncesto del mundo? So I want you to go around, and there are 18 questions around the room. And so with your partner, make sure that you understand what that question is asking. That one, for example, is asking, who is the best player of basketball of the world? The first one refers to a male player, el mejor jugador. O, and the second one, la mejor jugadora, or female basketball player of the world. And then you would need to answer that question. Each of you answer your own. You might not be in agreement. That's okay. But just so that you know how to answer, for example, you could say, Caitlin Clark es la mejor jugadora de baloncesto del mundo. And some of you might agree, some of you might not. But just make sure that you know how to write that statement. So make sure you're writing in complete sentences on your whiteboard, and check one another and help each other out to do their very best. Then I want you to make sure to have enough time to work on the study guide that should be printed and on the desk waiting for your sub to pass them out. But then later, feel free to access the video so that you can see what things should have been done and how they should have been answered, and some information about comparative and superlative statements. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Hello, class. How are you? I am wanting to share. Hello, class. How are you? I wanted to share one of the assignments that you had given to you this week. At least I hope you did. And that is about the superlatives, superlativos. This means when you say someone is the best at something, the most something of, in this case, we said the class. You could say of the family, of the world, of America, whatever you want. But in this case, your use of the superlatives was for people in the class. I did want to point out that, for example, it says, ¿Quién es la persona más callada de la clase? And the answer was, Marcos es la persona más callada de la clase. Remember that la persona is always feminine, and that's why we have the word callada and not callado when describing Marcos, because we're not really describing Marcos per se, we're describing the person, la persona. So all of your adjectives that you're going to be using to describe the people of the class are going to be in the feminine form, only because we're asking about la persona. So notice that when we ask the question, ¿Quién es la persona más callada de la clase? We can simply replace the word quién, who, with the name of the person who fits that description. So Marcos es la persona más callada de la clase. And that's a simple way to phrase those questions. Now, you were supposed to do this as a gap activity, so your partner would have had these pictures and told you the answers. Notice that some of the words are synonyms. So, of course, we have alta, and in our pictures, we did have the word tall, the tallest person, that was Diego. Bonita reservada, we did not actually use the word reservada, did we? We actually used our English word for most shy, but that would be Umberto. And then inteligente, we actually use the word smartest, which is a synonym. So I hope you're able to figure that out. Inteligente agresiva. So agresiva, there it is, most aggressive. That was a cognate. Amable, and we had the word friendliest, which it could be kind, it could be friendly. And then trabajadora, the most hardworking. So then if you had the B part of the paper, if you were partner B, you asked the questions about the person who is most respectful, respetuosa, la persona más molestosa, the most annoying person. And when we went up to the pictures, we found those descriptions. I like the word whiniest for Carlita. And then let me just show you that I have linked the answer key on your Canvas page so you can check your own work. But the most important thing that I want you to take from this assignment is, what is the question asking? It's asking who is the person most something, and we use adjectives, of the class. If we're talking about your family, it would be of the family, de la familia. And then how to make those statements in the positive. And then you can also check what words you were looking at to make sure that you were able to make those connections, the laziest, the shortest, the most respectful, etc. So that was one assignment that you were supposed to do this week, and I hope you were able to get it done. The second thing that we did was, let me see if I can find that one. We had a handout in which you were making some other comparisons and some other superlatives. And so let me go ahead and find those if I can. Oh, good grief. I know you're counting how many tabs I have open. I am counting them too. I believe that we had this before break. If you did not get a chance to get this, it is linked on Canvas. But we also used comparisons not just of superlatives, who is the most whatever in the class, but we also made comparisons using our phrases for who is the oldest, who is the tallest, who is the most small, or what animal is more small than the dog, those kind of things. So if this should have been familiar to you. And then again, if you were partner B, you had other questions and you had to look up answers. So notice that there are different ways to compare. So the first one, ¿quién es más delgada que Maria? Who is more slender than Maria? And remember, your task is to remember this formula. Más, adjective, que, means more something than. That is a comparison of inequality because they are not the same. And then, ¿quién tiene una barba más larga que Vicente? Who has a beard more long than Vicente? So, who has a longer beard than Vicente? We would probably say in English. As equals, we would use the phrase tan, adjective, como. And again, this is on the back of that handout that you should have been receiving on Monday or Tuesday. ¿Quiénes son tan trabajadores como Paco? Who are as hardworking as Paco? So remember that phrase of comparison, of equality, tan, and then an adjective, como. And then again, for the inequality, peor means worse. So, ¿quién saca una peor nota? So, who received or receives a worse grade than the grade of Marcos? And then menor is of itself, it just means younger than. So, ¿quién es menor que Ana? Who is younger? Que means than Anna. And so I hope that you were able to put those phrases together and compare them with your notes to know how to say older than, younger than, as tall as small as, and who has hair as curly as Isa. So hopefully you were able to catch those things as well. If not, I love it when you save your notes, so I'm kind of hoping that you did. We also had a gap activity where you remembered your family members' names, or the name in Spanish for the family members, and the chores of the house. So you were supposed to ask the question, ¿Qué hacen los parientes? Or, ¿Qué hace? And then boy cousin, tu primo. So what does the primo do? And if you were answering that, you looked here and saw the primo was making the bed. So what does the primo do? El primo hace la cama. And I hope you were able to remember all the vocab for these different chores, for dusting, for cleaning the bathroom, for washing dishes, making the bed, taking out the trash, cleaning up the house or cleaning up the living room. I think that's vacuuming and setting the table. And the only ones that were different, sweeping, cooking, there's the setting the table again, feeding the dogs, again, vacuuming, cutting the grass, washing the dishes, and making the bed. So I hope you were able to follow that as well. I don't want you to lose your vocab that you've learned with household chores. Okay, let's see that. These are going to be stationed around the desks today. So you're going to go through with your partner and ask the question and make sure that you understand it. So number 1 says, ¿Quién es el mejor jugador o la mejor jugadora de baloncesto del mundo? So if you were to talk with your partner, what do you think that means? I'll give you a second to chat with your partner. And I hope you noticed that it asks, who is the best player? So this would be the male player, or the best female player of basketball of the world. And you might say, Caitlin Clark es la mejor jugadora de baloncesto del mundo. You might have other opinions about that, but that's okay. Just make sure you know how to answer the question and what the question is asking. You might need a partner with these because we've got words like entretenido, which we haven't seen for a while. We've got talentoso, deliciosa, and other things. So cantante. I hope you enjoy that activity and I hope it refreshes your memory. Now for today, and then we had this survey where you were going around thinking about the people in your class. You would fill in your classmate's name when asking, ¿Quién es la persona más sociable? Again, we're asking about la persona, so all of our adjectives are in the feminine, unless they are like adolescente, which does not have gender, or interesante. But you would answer with guys' names, but if you're going to use the phrase la persona más, and then your adjective, you would leave it in the feminine because we're actually using the word la persona to dictate if our adjective is going to be masculine or feminine. Then you were supposed to choose one of the questions of the chart and copy it the same way it was written above on this line below. Then you're supposed to go around and ask as many of your classmates the question that you had selected. And then you're going to record the answers below. So if I were to choose, ¿Quién es la persona más entretenida? Well, last year I had a student named Dallas who was very entertaining. So I would ask my students, ¿Quién es la persona más entretenida? Or ask my classmates. And then I would keep a tally here. And Dallas, of course, got 1 score from me. But then other people could add their comments and mention other students. And every time it says keep track of how many times someone's name is mentioned, so you can report the most common answer. And then we would have gone over that in class. But if you didn't have anyone, you could have also written the word nadie, meaning no one. At the very end, on the back page, you were to write a statement looking at your responses that you collected and determine which of your classmates' name was mentioned most frequently. So in my case, let's say that everyone agreed with me that Dallas was the most entertaining. So then in this award, I would write a sentence in Spanish stating that that person is the most whatever of the class. So I would say, Dallas es la persona más entretenida de la clase. And then you would choose whatever statement you had chosen as well and turn it into that little medal that they earned. Okay, well, the last thing that you have for today is your study guide. So when we go to my Spanish 2 study guide for you, let's see if I can find that. Oop, Spanish 1 and your Spanish 2. I don't want to forget that. So your study guide looks like this, and it should prepare you for that writing test where you are going to make comparisons and superlatives. So each of the following pairs of people is very much alike in some way. Follow the arrow to the adjective, and then use that adjective to describe how the two people are alike. So Antonio and Marta, Luisa and Rosa, mis padres, mis tíos, yo y mi amigo. So then you're going to use these adjectives. Remember that you're making them the same. So you're saying as something as. Hopefully, looking at your notes and maybe remembering, you will remember how to say the phrase as something as and using that formula. Now you're going to use a statement or write a statement that is about inequality. They are not the same, so we'll use a different formula for this. So each of the following pairs is very different in some way. Write a comparative statement about how the following people or things are different. Make sure that the adjective agrees with the subject of the sentence. So Shaq, if I were to say Shaq is as tall as Senora Dark, first of all, that would so not be true. So you would want to say Shaq is more tall than Senora Dark. And since I mentioned Shaq first and he's a guy, my word for tall will be in the masculine. And so you are going to choose different comparison phrases to give you lots of good practice. So sometimes you might want to switch that around in order to create a sentence with a statement that's true, but using the different formula. So then you would use Senora Dark is less tall than Shaq, and you would need to change that less tall to reflect that Senora Dark is feminine. And then you go through and write those 4 sentences. Then you're going to be talking about superlatives, making a statement that talks about something is the most something, and in this case, it's of your classes. So you would write something like the most difficult, the most interesting, the most easiest, the funnest, whatever adjective you want to use, but you'll make 3 statements. Then the following questions using a comparison in Spanish, you would either use more something than, less something than, older than, younger than, better than, or worse than, or as blank as. So make sure you do that. Oh, and since most of you don't know Senora Sabaka, I will change this to dark. And then it asks those 3 questions, so you'll make a statement responding to that question. And then finally, answer the following questions using a superlative in Spanish. Superlatives are things that in English we often hear est at the end of that word. Tallest, shortest, smartest. So go ahead and use that study guide to prepare for your test on, well, next week. I'm hoping it'll be next week. And in the meantime, let's see. I think that should help. If you have any questions, I'm hoping that you'll be able to email me and I may be able to respond. Otherwise, definitely talk to one another, make sure that you're all understanding. Thank you so much.